Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody. I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Gina Warner. Gina is a nationally recognized nonprofit leader who spends a significant amount of her personal time focused on issues of women's leadership and female empowerment. She is the founder of the Badass Women's Book Club, where she challenges women to live their best badass lives through book discussions, online coaching, and personal development resources. Please join me in welcoming Gina Warner. Hey, Gina.
Hey, Tammy. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's such a joy to have you, Gina. Where should we begin?
I started as a classroom teacher, left teaching, went to law school, worked in the U.S. Senate, have been a lobbyist. I've led a citywide youth development intermediary. Now I lead a national association. I definitely have some through lines in all my work, issues around women and children and education. But it's not like I enter college. Well, for one thing, I had 6 different majors in college. So, it's like I enter college.
So wait, let's go there for a second, Gina, because, it's funny when I talk to people about their careers, they kind of they run through it very quickly because they know their own story very clearly. And it's like, you're saying, well, I was a classroom teacher. Then I, went to law school. And it's like, wait a minute, that was like years of your life.
Was. Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, for people listening, so what were those college years like when you had 6 majors? What was going on for you at the time? And how did you end up deciding to become a classroom teacher?
Well, I always point out to my daughter and others, I still finished in 4 years, even with my 6 different majors.
That's not easy because there's all those prereqs and...
Yeah, I don't know if that would work these days, but I started college thinking I wanted to be a doctor, right? Because that's what people who made good grades did. Never mind the fact that I didn't really like science. I didn't, it's just one of the, and I think that's probably been a through line in my life too. Is just really thinking about what I enjoy and what you enjoy, and really pushing back against maybe expectations to do what people think, you will do or want to do. So I think I was a pre-med major for maybe, 1 quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And some of my majors were communications and psychology. I was a general education major. I ended up graduating with a special education degree and taught gifted and talented education for 2 years in the public school system in Mobile, Alabama. And then decided I wanted to go to law school.
What propelled you from special education to law?
Yeah, maybe I was caught up in the, I think Law and Order was just starting. It wasn't that, but that was, I've always had an interest in justice issues.
Uh-huh.
I didn't really go in. I think I never thought I wanted to be like, a lawyer who worked in a law firm. That was never, my interest to do that. But at the same time, I didn't really, know what kind of law. I worked in a law firm. I worked clerk for a plaintiff's law firm in law school. I clerked at the district attorney's office, which was, endlessly entertaining. But I also worked in politics. And so when I, just in local politics, I was living in New Orleans at the time. And so when it came time, I finished law school and finished the bar, had an opportunity to work in Washington for a U.S. senator, a woman U.S. senator from New Orleans, and just saw that as an opportunity to bring together, really my law experience. So it was really not law per se. It was more policy level work and also a good amount of political work as well. So, and I say to people, I was invited back to lecture or to, present at my law school many times about alternative careers in law because, we just don't talk to, I think, lawyers about what else can you do with a law degree. And I think, back to your earlier question about, why, what did I think I wanted to major in? I think that a lot of us, particularly as women professionals, have an obligation to help young people, young women in particular, understand the vast array of career choices available to them. And I think that's something maybe that I didn't really have. And so I had to, maybe that's why I've spent 30 years trying to try out different things on my own to see, what I enjoyed, and have been fortunate to have a lot of good opportunities, because I don't think I really understood the opportunities that were available to me.
Well, it sounds like you certainly took advantage of many opportunities available to you over
Yes.
time. I mean, you clearly kept your eyes wide open. I think that, when you talk about the, your very first, entry into college and thinking about being pre-med, even though you really didn't like science that much, it kind of reminds me of, how many people were, let's say, good students, or they were good in something, and people might have said, well, you're good at this, or you're smart, or you're good at that. You should become a doctor, or you should become a this or that. And, people don't always, especially young people, don't always stop and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I'm good at that, but maybe that's not what I want. And it sounds like, you took liberal arts to the extreme, and you had 6 majors, and you really did experiment and try a number of different things, and landed in something that did turn into a profession for several years. And then you had, it sounds like you made a courageous move going to law school. At least it sounds like a courageous move to me.
Yeah, well, financially courageous for sure. So I, and I think I've always kept myself open to what opportunities are. I've never sat down and said, in 5 years I want to do this, in 10 years I want to do that, or be there and do that. But I have always, I think, had in my mind that I wanted to keep moving forward. And maybe not particularly like moving up, like I want to be, this, but it has always been an eye toward a forward movement, opportunities, and, just keeping myself engaged with things that interest me. And maybe it goes back to that, pushing myself into something that didn't interest me. I've spent a lot of time really opening myself up to things that do interest me and give me energy, that I feel, that just do feel a lot of energy and passion and excitement about.
Yeah. So you noticed that you paid attention to the things that energized you.
Yeah, I think, I think I'm much more attuned to that now, as, a much older adult. But, I am cognizant of that, in the case of my own daughter. I'm cognizant of that, people on my team, really try. And I've always just been a big believer too, in trying to give people opportunities to try on different things. Because and there were times in my career when I was given those chances by people to let me, really try on new opportunities, new things that interested me, that were maybe really pushing, my growth edges a little bit. At the same time, I've also been, constricted by people, different bosses who wouldn't give me that freedom. So I've always, really wanted to make sure that, I just think experiences are so much of what develops us as people. And so whether those experiences happen within the confines of a work day, or, if anyone on my team comes to me and says, hey, I'm interested in going to this conference, I'm like, yes, let's find the money for you to do that. I mean, that would be great. So I practice that myself, try to practice that, in my personal life, and then certainly in my professional life too.
So you worked for a U.S. senator. What did you do after that point?
Yeah, so I worked for, her name was Mary Landrieu, Senator Landrieu. Worked for her throughout her first term and a little bit into her second term to her reelection. Did worked in her communications office, and then worked in her New Orleans regional office. I loved it because it was a lot of networking, a lot of solving problems for people, a lot of connecting people to resources and solutions. So again, a lot of things that gave me energy, work, and just a lot of exposure to really fascinating and interesting people. So I did that for almost 8 years, and then had built up a lot of good contacts, in government, national, state, local government work. And so worked as a lobbyist for a while, representing public school board and different some youth development organizations of different nonprofits. Did that for, let's see, my math, I think probably 3 or 4 years. And then a big change in my life, and not just my circumstances, but a change that really had me think differently about my work and the impact of my work. And so that was going through and surviving Hurricane Katrina.
Oh.
So I was living in New Orleans. I'd lived in New Orleans at that point off and on for almost 20 years. Suffered personally. My husband and I, our daughter was just a few months old, and we lost our home. Lost a lot of my lobbying clients. The work just went away. But then had an opportunity shortly after the storm, was approached to run a youth development intermediary in the city of New Orleans, and just saw that as a great opportunity again that brought together a lot of my experiences and contacts and connections, and did that work for 6 years. And
Wait,
that was
can you say that again? What that was? A youth?
Yeah. So it was a youth intermediary. It was called the Partnership for Youth Development.
Oh.
So it was the organizations within the city that were providing youth development after school work, kind of brought them together.
Okay.
And advocated at the time, as you can imagine, for investments in play. A lot of decisions were being made in the city about how they were going to rebuild and what money was going to be used for, and just really made sure that issues for children and for families and young people were top of mind in people's discussions in the rebuilding effort.
I see.
Yeah. So that was
that sounds like years. A lot of your experience with communications and problem solving, and some of the work that you did in the senator's office must have come in really handy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, so that changed me, as you can imagine, in many ways. It made me think differently about really, when I think about two key things.
Yeah.
It made me think a lot differently about leadership. I think anyone who went through that experience would agree that as citizens, we were failed in a lot of traditional leadership. A lot of traditional leaders failed us. At the same time, a lot of what we would call non-traditional leaders absolutely emerged. Just people who, they were maybe moms who had, organized their school's PTA, and they decided to take those skills and run donation centers out of their garages. It was just really an amazing, inspiring time that huge imprint on me, and had me think differently about what it means to be a leader, and really recommitted me in my work in the Partnership for Youth Development to really think about giving voice and, again, an opportunity to people who were really trying to step into leadership roles. And at the same time, really kind of step up my own leadership, as well.
Yeah.
And I think that work that I did there, so I did that work post-Katrina for 6 years. I say it's like dog years, felt like, 25, 30, whatever. But that, so that propelled me into my current position at the National Afterschool Association. So I've been working in, the youth development field, had been making, connections in my work there. And then when I saw the opportunity, when I saw the job posting for the president open, I said, I think I want to apply for this. And so that was a big move, because it wasn't just a change of job. It was, moving from Louisiana to Northern Virginia, for myself, for my family. So it was a, big change for all of us.
So what year did you did you move to that job and move to the to Northern Virginia area?
So that was 2012. Yeah. So I've
Okay.
been in this job 8.5, 7. Yeah, it was like I moved in like November of 2012. So
Yeah.
8 years. So
Wow.
I talked about the things I learned in Katrina about about thinking about leadership differently. And then the other thing that I learned, and I wasn't maybe quite ready to tap into it yet, but I saw it happening, is that um, all of leadership doesn't have to happen in the confines of your work experience, right? Everything about, we tend to think about, okay, I'm a leader at work, and then when I, close my office door and I go home, then I'm just someone else, kind of thing. And so um, I began to think about, if I really am passionate about this giving opportunity, to people to step into leadership, or to try out what leadership and being a bigger person, bigger, bolder person means, what would that look like?
Mm.
And this is going on in my head for, kind of rolling things around in my head for years. Epiphany moment. I had just uh, finished a leadership, really, really great leadership experience, national fellowship program, highly competitive. I was just so fortunate to have been accepted, but the whole time I was there, and it was like a 6-month process, and we had different, we came together at different times and all that. Throughout that experience, I was not living my biggest self in it. Like, I would come home from these 3-day things. I'm like, did you say anything? Did you ever raise your hand? Like, kind of talking, and I didn't, right? And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Act different, be there. And I couldn't, for whatever reason, just major, imposter syndrome going on in my head. And I remember, like, at the airport coming home from that final culminating graduation of the fellowship, being in a bookstore. And I've said, like, I've always loved books. I've always been a book person. Being in a bookstore and seeing this book, and it had maybe been out it had not been out that long, but the book, and I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with it, called You're a Badass, has this super bright yellow cover. And I was like, okay, well, I am not feeling like a badass. So let me just grab this book and let me see if maybe it can help me feel. Cause, clearly I'm not, being my most badass self. So let me read this book. And so grabbed the book and, just started reading it on the plane. And by the time I landed and had was writing notes to the margin, because I'm just a big, note taker, writing things down all the time, notes to myself and all that. I just decided, like, okay, I got to get my act together on this. Like, what I've almost wasted a really great opportunity. And I just, I need to, like, figure out how to live a bigger life for myself, because I really care about wanting to give these bigger opportunities to other people too. So, kind of landed on the idea of a book club. I know that sounds like kind of, like, book clubs have been around for like a super long time. Thanks Oprah, they've had a,
right.
but, I'd had an independent bookstore open in my community where I live, and really, just love going in bookstores. So and it was a woman-owned bookstore. So I really wanted to do everything I could. So instead of, like, starting the bookstore at my house, a book club at my house,
Right.
I went to the bookstore and asked, could I start it here? And they were really supportive. And so that was in November it was 2 years ago, November of 2017. Just kind of, like, went to my personal email list and said, hey, and it was like, mothers who were friends of my daughters. It was neighbors. It was just people I knew, PTA, and said, hey, I'm starting this book club. It's called the Badass Women's Book Club. We're going to talk about this book, You're a Badass. It's going to be at Bard's Alley Bookstore. Come join us. And like 25 women came, and it was great.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, because it was really those talk about, I remember, like, getting to the bookstore a little bit early, set up and thinking, okay, like, what if no one comes? Like, anytime you throw a party, like, is anyone going to come? And thinking, okay. And then thankfully people did, and they kept coming. And because we're all struggling to live our biggest, our best, our most badass life.
Yeah.
And we want to be in a community, and that, just like I was struggling, there were other people struggling, and we want to we want to have a safe space to talk about what that means and what that looks like
Yeah.
with other people. And that I realized was what the book club was. It's funny about that. When I went to approach the bookstore, one of the women who was managing events, I remember I asked her, so I said, so this is what I'm thinking about calling it. I want to run the title by you and you tell me if it's too much. I mean, because you got to understand, I was raised in the South. My mother, I was like, I just don't even know that my mother understands how she, I don't think she knows, she's not on the internet or anything like that. How she knows that I run a book club called, the Badass Women's Book Club. I think she might have a problem with that. But
Right.
I remember asking, like, is that name too much? The one's like, that is not too much. And I think also, if you think about the time where we were in 2017, and it has done nothing but increase since then, we'd had the Women's March. We had, women
Right.
were, we've had all these, what we thought were pinnacle moments for women, but we realized we still have, many more struggles to overcome. Because I don't think that anyone sitting around that table, it's like, you were declaring you are a badass, but there was also some aspirational moments. Like, I'm a badass, like, some of the time, most of the time.
Right.
I don't think any of us necessarily would say that we feel that way all the time. But we
Right.
want to,
Right.
we aspire to that.
Right.
Because that's like,
it's a mindset, really.
totally.
It's about how do we carry ourselves through our lives, and how do we, I'm sort of thinking about what you were saying earlier about how you try to stay open to opportunities, how that has moved you through from, point A to point B to point C, all the points that you've taken in your life, that you keep moving forward, that you keep engaged in what interests you and what energizes you. And I keep coming back to that because, even if it scares you, at the same time excites you, right? Because fear and excitement can feel like the same things. And so we're not just saying badass because, giggle, giggle, we're saying, badass. It really is about stepping into our own strengths, our own power, not just for the sake of some ego driven thing, as much as it is about being our best selves and feeling
Yep.
good about ourselves and feeling like we're making the mark we want to make. And I know how important this book club has been to you, and growing it. And I was curious if, when you're looking back now, almost 2 years ago now, just about 2 years, you know, uh, could you imagine that it would look like what it looks like today?
Never. and so that was the thing. So the book club kept meeting every month at the bookstore. I just posted about it, like, just, on my personal Facebook page. I just sharing pictures, things like that. And then I had friends of mine who lived in different parts of the country, start asking me, or making comments like, I wish I had one of those where we were, or, hey, how can we start one of those? And so this was probably started the book club in November. This is probably like February, March. So I turned 50 that March. And I was like, you know what? What would it take to make this a bigger thing? So I took some of my, some birthday money, gift to myself, and had a website built, and so created this online book club community, and now have, the person who had never posted anything. I mean, you can go back and look at my first Instagram post for the book club, and I think it was maybe May of that year of 2018 or whatever. And now to have almost 12,000 followers is just blows my mind, for that. And it just, so it makes me excited, not because it's like me, hey, look at me, I did that. And then I have a Facebook group that's like 1,000 women. And, it's because I think there is something there that we're all craving. Like you said, I think we are all craving to live our best, I say our best badass lives, to live our best, most authentic lives, to connect with other people who are going to support us in that, to find resources that are going to help us. And those resources are very often books.
Right.
And I think the other unintended benefit I saw I didn't see was creating a platform for women to share their stories, women authors. And so I've been very fortunate, to have been approached by a lot of women authors, telling their stories and being able to give and so that's kind of my goal for this coming year is how do I give even more of a platform for women who are sharing their stories to be able to connect them with this broad community of women readers.
Wow. And from what I understand, there's even more coming.
Want to follow Badass Women's Book Club on Instagram. I do what's called a Badass Boost every Monday. I post just a little challenge for people to take to really, and this month, the challenges are all loosely focused around confidence. Last month it was focused around, thinking about reflecting on your successes. And so that idea of like just taking these small, focused, intentional actions. And so I'm creating this set of 30-day guides. And I hope to have my first one up in the next couple of weeks as we think about, the new year and what what goals we want to set for ourselves. But so what can you do over the course of 30 days to move yourself forward, to move forward in living, your best badass life? And so they're going to be really focused. I sort of asked my community, what are the issues that you want to address? And it's everything from overcoming imposter syndrome, promoting myself with confidence, building a network of support for myself. The first one is going to be on discovering and owning your badassness. What makes you a badass, because it is different for every person.
Right.
But how do you discover it for yourself? And then how do you start to practice it?
Right.
So that'll be the first one. So I've really enjoyed pulling together a lot of great resources, books and other articles and all kinds of things to create these 30-day guides.
I think it's wonderful. And by the time that this airs, this podcast is uploaded, I believe your first 30-day guide will be out and available, and we will have all of that information available in the show notes. And I really see your 30-day guides as being kind of a compilation of all that you have experienced yourself, that it comes from a depth that you bring to the work that you're doing now.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Gina, this has been really interesting and really enlightening. And I want to encourage our listeners to take a look at the show notes, look at all the links to all the things that Gina's been talking about, and check out the Badass Women's Book Club. And also I'd like to include links to the National Afterschool Association.
Yeah, please.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah,
because we may have listeners interested in your work there.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for spending this time with me today. It's been wonderful. I loved hearing about your career path and all that you've done with it.
Well, Tammy, thank you for the opportunity. It's been like a nice trip down memory lane in many ways, and thank you for letting me talk about my story and share my resources and the work I'm doing. I've really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Gina Warner. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her personal and professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? Is there something you'll put into action this week that you'll benefit from for years to come? Share what resonated with you in the show notes at workfromtheinsideout.com. Look for episode 054. That's also where you'll find all the links and resources from today's podcast. If you were inspired by this episode with Gina, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find my page at tammygoulerloeb.com/Apple. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. And who knows, maybe you'll be my next interview on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.